There is a ton to be excited about this Auburn football season. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on in to Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I am Lindsay Crosby, writer at auburndaily.com, filling in for Zac Blackerby, who is right now out of the country. Don't worry, you will still hear him. He left us with some interviews and things like that. Joining me this week, my co-host, Darrell Dapprich, Montgomery radio legend. I want to thank everybody for being here on Memorial Day. It's a great holiday. Also want to thank everybody for making this your first listen every single day. We're free and available everywhere you get your podcasts. And let's make sure this week is a good week so that Zac comes back and is happy with how everything went and trusts us to do more of this. Darrell, Memorial Day, you've got a nice little Auburn connection to Memorial Day. Tell us about that real quick.
Yeah, I felt led to do this as we're memorializing so many veterans and so many soldiers and so many wonderful people that lost their lives for our country. I got a tweet earlier today from a gentleman who his uncle was named Tim Christian. Tim Christian was a wide receiver at Auburn in the late 60s, set all kind of receiving records. Unfortunately, he passed away and lost his battle to cancer. And his nephew just really memorialized him and gave him a great tribute, said he was his idol. He was his hero. And I just felt moved by that. I also was very close to my uncle who I lost 7 years ago to pancreatic cancer. And so as we're memorializing folks, I felt like with the Auburn family losing one of their own this week, and Tim Christian and his nephew doing such a great job remembering him. He said the family would appreciate it if we mentioned it. They watched the show, listened to the show. So our thoughts and prayers are out to the Christian family and to Tim Christian, who, was a great Auburn man, split end in those late 60s teams. Number 85, did a little research on him. So we wanted to mention him and what he means to the Auburn family. So thanks for listening and watching. And we hope that you guys can find some peace in the upcoming years.
Good message there. In later in the show, we're going to talk about Miles Kelly committing to Auburn. We'll get to that in the third segment. But first, this season for football, this upcoming season for football is going to be really interesting because it's the first season finally with Texas and Oklahoma in the SEC. And so the schedule's a little bit different. I wanted to take a couple segments here with you, Darrell, and kind of go through the football schedule and arbitrarily rank things. It's always fun to do that, right? So we're going to look at our most anticipated or hyped matchups personally for the two of us, starting with the number one most exciting matchup here. We're going to go all the way through the not cupcake games. We're not ranking Alabama A&M. We're not ranking New Mexico. We're not ranking ULM. But everybody else we're going to rank. Darrell, why don't you give us your number one?
Mine is Oklahoma. And basically the fact that the newbies are coming into the conference, I cannot wait to see them at Jordan-Hare. This is you mentioned it, the Oklahoma-Texas tandem coming into the league where your first look at them, your first shot at them is at home at Jordan-Hare. So that's, it could have been a situation where you could have been on the road. It could have been Texas, who Auburn's had a little bit more of a history with. So I love the fact that it's Oklahoma and they're coming to Auburn. The whole Brett Venables thing, what he said a couple years ago, kind of took a little shot at Auburn, talking about how him and his daughter were talking about why he didn't take the Auburn job. Auburn's lying in the weeds for Mr. Venables, and I think it's going to be exciting. So that's my most anticipated game for this upcoming year.
Yeah, it's easy to make the case for Oklahoma at number one, right? And spoiler alert, like that's mine as well. I wanted to go a different direction. I wanted to talk about maybe Cal or Texas A&M, but that Oklahoma thing, to me, you don't have a ton of history with Oklahoma. You haven't really played them recently. And there's this perception, maybe this is because I have family in Texas, I have family who've gone to all the different schools. We have family who's gone to Oklahoma, family's gone to Texas, Baylor, all of that stuff. But both Texas and Oklahoma have this idea that they're going to come in and just kind of run not the entire conference, right? Like everybody still recognizes Georgia's the best team in the conference. We're not debating that. But Texas and Oklahoma fans have this idea that they're immediately going to come in and challenge Georgia for the division in 2024, like that soon, that they are coming in as the second best teams in the conference. And so that matchup, it's not your first conference matchup. That's Arkansas the week before. It's not your first Power 5 matchup. That's Cal in week 2. But to me, that's the real milestone of where is Auburn, where you can take on one of the best teams in the conference that you poached to expand yours, and you get to see how good you are. So we both have Oklahoma. That is September 28th. We both have that as our number 1. Darrell, who's your number 2 most hyped matchup for the 2024 season?
In full disclosure about this, we've not talked about it at all with each other. So this is kind of neat that we're seeing we're seeing each other's for the first time, not knowing, and see how they lined up. My second is Cal, which is pretty interesting. People be like, why Cal? Well, it's the first Power 5, well now Power 4 team on Auburn's schedule. It's another home game. I want to see how far Auburn has come from struggling to beat Cal on the road last year to is there separation to where there's a big difference between this year's team and last year's team, and that'll be shown in what Auburn does against Cal at Jordan-Hare. So Cal is my second most hyped or anticipated game.
See, I fully understand the argument, right? I think for me, the only reason I don't have them number 2, I have them a little bit later, I'll get to them in a minute, is I feel like there's a built-in excuse that the national media is going to have if Cal comes into Auburn and loses that game. And it's, oh, well, it's so hot in early September in the South. They're not used to the heat and the humidity. And so maybe I'm looking at this from the national perspective and not the Auburn perspective, but I feel like unless you run them out of the building, unless you win 45-10, there's not going to be any credit given to Auburn because of that victory, because Cal has a built-in excuse. Well, they had to travel across the country. That game is probably going to end up being like a 11 o'clock kick or a 2 o'clock kick. And so it's really early in their heads. There's the time change and all of that stuff. And so I just feel like you're not going to get the credit that you deserve in that one. For me, I think it's actually your next to last matchup. My number 2 is Texas A&M. Because you go into College Station in week 4 last year and you lose 27-10, and it wasn't really that close. And for me, there's a thing with Auburn, again, back to that national perspective, where it feels like there's so much trying to figure out who is the class of the conference behind the top teams, right? Georgia, Alabama, they're the top teams. Everybody respects them. But after that, there's a whole tier of teams, and Texas A&M has themselves at like close to the top of that tier, warranted or not. In this case, I don't think it is. And a lot of people, because of how last year went, because of the New Mexico State game, a lot of people have Auburn at the bottom of that second tier in the SEC. And so I think that's a good matchup to kind of show, hey, we can go and we can beat a lot of those teams in that second tier. Unfortunately, you don't get to take on an Ole Miss or a Mississippi State. You lose out on that whole stretch you had last year of LSU, Ole Miss, Mississippi State. But Texas A&M, to me, is one of those teams in that tier. I think they're beatable. I don't think they're as good as they think they are. Maybe we have alumni in the family from Texas A&M as well. So for me, Texas A&M is number 2. I want to get to your number 3 and kind of go a little bit quicker. We'll do that in just a second,
Sure.
Right here on Locked On Auburn. Back to our chat with Darrell in just a second. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your vehicle alive and running at peak performance. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and even level it up. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts to search from, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your parts guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your vehicle running at ebaymotors.com. Also, items only, exclusions to apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back into Locked On Auburn. Lindsay, Crosby, Darrell, Dapprich. Covering for Zac Blackerby. He is out of the country this week. You will hear from him this week. He left us some interviews that he pre-recorded for us. We're talking about the most hyped matchups for Auburn football this fall. And Darrell started off Oklahoma, number 1. That was mine as well. His number 2 was Cal. My number 2 was Texas A&M. Darrell, outside of those two, what's your number 3 most anticipated matchup of the 2024 season?
Now we're going to get into the predictability part of it and what should be every year in the rivalry games. I've got Alabama at 3 based upon some things I've said in the past that I really feel like Auburn, to me, as a barometer, will be where they need to be as a program when they win in Tuscaloosa or start to become very, very competitive again. So I want to use this as a measuring stick, as a barometer. See if the gap's been closed with Saban being gone, Hugh Freeze having 2 recruiting classes now under his belt. And so the hype, I get it's the Iron Bowl, so it should be the most well, sometimes it's just not to me. When Auburn used to go on the road, the years that Alabama had really, really good teams, and it was like a foregone conclusion that Auburn was probably going to get beat, it wasn't that hype to me. I didn't look forward to it. It wasn't anticipated. This one is because I want to see how much Auburn has closed the gap.
Yeah, being able to, like, the place that you want to be for Auburn football is you want to be beating the teams you're supposed to beat. You beat the Vandies, you beat the Arkansas, and then you want to win more than you lose against that middle tier that we like to believe we're at the top of. And then you want to be competitive against those teams like an Alabama, like a Georgia, which both of those one-score games last year. Like, you were competitive against them. How much of that was the Jordan-Hare magic? I think that's the big question we're going to find out when you go to Tuscaloosa on November 30th. Kind of similar reasoning for me. My number 3 is that October 5th matchup in Athens against Georgia. And I think that, for me, the reason I have that one over Alabama is because you're just enough into the season where hopefully some of your young freshman talent, your Cam Coleman, your Bryce Kane, Harry Matthews, some of these guys have had an opportunity to get not necessarily comfortable in the SEC in college football, but they've gone through multiple conference matchups at that point. They've kind of figured out what works, what doesn't work. They've had 5 games under their belt to get the chemistry with Peyton Thorne. And that, when you get to that matchup, you're stepping up a level in opposing quality, right? Georgia's the best team in the country. Right? That's reigning champ. Like, come on. And I want to see what these young guys can do after the first 5 weeks of the season when you go into Georgia. I think that it's a similar idea that you have, right? It's just, I just don't want to wait until the end of the year to do it. But I want to see where you are against Georgia when you get to week 6, October 5th in Athens. What's your number 4, Darrell?
Georgia, for all the reasons you just mentioned. Also, obviously, I believe that'll be Auburn's first road test of the year. Coming out of September, you get 5 home games in September. You can come out of that 5-0. Now, where's the hype train coming? The national media. Oh, Auburn at 5-0 after a win over Oklahoma, coming into big bad Athens to play Georgia. So, for all those reasons that you mentioned and the couple that I just added to, Georgia is my number 4 most anticipated game.
See, it's my number 4 is Alabama for the same reasons that you mentioned. It's those tests against the best of the best. I do think, for me, just kind of looking at some of these, I do think some of the time is affecting me on this. Like, I have 2 of them at the very end of the year. The thought process here is because you have so many freshmen. I would hope that if you had a close matchup against Georgia, you could improve enough between now and the end of the year, combined with whatever happens to Alabama, because I think they could be bad this year, or down at least. You improve enough where if you can play Georgia close, you should be good enough to take a matchup against Alabama. So I think that's the other part of that for me. I have them at 4. So to recap, we both have Oklahoma at 1. You have Cal at 2, Alabama at 3, Georgia at 4. I have Texas A&M at 2, Georgia at 3, and Alabama at 4. What's your number 5?
Arkansas. And it may sound kind of strange, a team that Auburn should boat race, but the reason why it's so I think a little bit hyped or anticipated for me is because it's the first conference matchup of the year. Mm-hmm. And I know Cal's coming in, and but it's just different when it's your first SEC matchup. And so because of that, and because it'll be the first time that Auburn lines up against an SEC opponent, and it'll be at home at Jordan-Hare, that's number 5 for me.
So with the struggles you had last year, you go week 11, you go to Fayetteville, and you boat race Arkansas 48-10. It was a Gus Malzahn special, right? Mm-hmm. Just that was his career job options game every year, where he boat raced Arkansas, and he knew anything ever happens, I can go work at Arkansas. Are the expectations different now? Like, do you have to not only beat Arkansas, but you have to cover, you have to win by double digits for that to be successul? Just quick aside on that.
Yeah, I think so. They lost their quarterback, who was Jefferson was a big part of their squad and carried them a lot. Rocket Sanders moved on to South Carolina. So, yeah, I think if Auburn comes out of that game and doesn't win by at least 2 scores, you're scratching your head a little bit. And I think that's another reason why I want to see. I think Auburn wins that game and wins it impressively. Mm-hmm. But you're not going to beat them 48-10. I mean, it's going to be hard to match what you did or duplicate last year, but you don't have to. You get out of that game 35-17, 35-20, something like that. You're fine. You're rolling, and you're on to the next.
Okay. My number 5, I think, is Cal, kind of for the same reasons you mentioned. First Power 5 opponent. Everybody expects you to handle Alabama A&M more than thoroughly, right? But Cal is a matchup you struggled last year. Obviously, I don't remember a ton of specifics from that game. I watched it at your house, but it was like midnight when it came on.
We were so tired.
It was exhausting.
A baseball game.
Yeah. we had called a AA baseball game and then went and watched that. But no, it's similar reasons, right? This is your first real test of the season, and you want to see. Hopefully, you see some of those freshmen kind of produce against a more quality opponent than they will against Alabama A&M. So I think that's my number 5. We've got just a couple minutes left in this segment. What is your number? Your 6 and 7. Give me those 2 real quick.
Sure. Kentucky and Vandy. Kentucky, because it's been a while since Auburn's played in Lexington. I think Sean White got his first start as an Auburn quarterback the last time they went to Lexington. So just the unfamiliarity of that and playing a game in Lexington makes it anticipated for me. The Vanderbilt game is because I want some of Pavia, the quarterback for Vanderbilt that transferred from New Mexico State. I want to see Auburn get retribution and absolutely smoke that kid. I mean, I hate to say it, I just do. So that's a game. Otherwise, Vanderbilt wouldn't have any kind of draw or pull at all to me. But I want to see Pavia and Jordan-Hare fail. And so that's another one. So the Kentucky Vander condo right there, combination right there is what I'm looking forward to.
Which, by process of elimination, Missouri is your final team there at number 8. Because again, we're not doing any of these cheap ones, right? Or Texas A&M.
Well, A&M. Yeah, Texas A&M is my last one. Mizzou would be 8, and Texas A&M would be 9.
Ooh, okay. 30 seconds. Explain why A&M you just do not care about that game. In essence,
there is nothing about that game that's sexy to me. I don't know why. It just doesn't. I guess because where it's being played in the schedule.
Right.
If it was divisions like it used to be, it would hold more meaning to me. Because as you mentioned, it's Auburn and A&M battling for that next level. Right. After Alabama, maybe perhaps after Ole Miss, who's going to emerge? With it not being divisions anymore and everyone just being in a pot, it doesn't hold any more significance to me, especially being at home. I get it. Auburn's had to go against Texas A&M for some recruiting battles, but there's not a draw to me. Just like Missouri is a bland game. Yeah, if Auburn wins it, it's big, but going to Columbia and playing at home at Texas A&M just doesn't have the appeal to me that the other ones do.
Do you think if you move Texas A&M and ULM, where you're not trying to look past Texas A&M for Alabama, you get Texas A&M off of a bye, do you think that changes anything, or is it still just the matchup? It is what it is.
It is what it is, except if it was moved earlier into the year, then it would have a little, like if A&M was the first conference game for Auburn or the second game conference, then it would hold a little bit more meaning to me. But right now, the way it sits, the way it's towards the end of the year, the story will have been written to a certain extent already for the Auburn football season. The narrative will be out there already. Now, if Auburn had got 9 wins, let's just say they've already won 9 football games, and then they play A&M, you're dang right that game's going to be hyped, and I'm going to be really, really excited to get to 10 wins or it changes the narrative a little bit. But for right now, as it is, without looking into a crystal ball, it's kind of meh to me.
I get it. Yeah. So kind of wrapping up my list real quick, Arkansas at 6, kind of similar reasons you mentioned. Like they're expected to boat race them. You did it in Fayetteville last year. You get to do it in Auburn this year. Not too worried about that. And then for me, at Mizzou, at Kentucky, Vandy, all coming out of a bye. The month of October is just road games that, for the most part, outside of Georgia, don't really like. I'm more excited about the bye on October 12th than I am about going to Missouri. Right? It's just.
What about the Pavia factor that I mentioned? Does that intrigue you at all? Wanting to see Auburn kind of get a little retribution on that kid?
If he runs his mouth between now and then, maybe. Like if he gives bulletin board material to Auburn, then you beat him 31-15 in Nashville last year in a 5,000 capacity stadium that is more suited for high schoolers, right? I'd be more excited about that Mizzou, Kentucky, Vandy lineup if it was baseball than if it was football. It feels like it's okay. Kentucky's going to be fine. They're overhyped every year. They're not going to be great. Mizzou, Vandy, who cares? It just doesn't matter to me. Who cares? I would trade them out for other teams in the conference in a heartbeat, but that's just me.
Yeah.
All right. In just a minute, we're going to talk about Miles Kelly committing to Auburn over the weekend. We'll do that next right here on Locked On Auburn. Welcome back into Locked On Auburn, the Memorial Day edition. I'm Lindsay Crosby, joined by Darrell Dapprich. We are filling in for Zac Blackerby this week. He is out of the country, has left us some content. You'll see him later this week, some pre-recorded interviews he did, previewing some of these matchups we've talked about today, actually. But in the meantime, Georgia Tech transfer Miles Kelly has committed to Auburn. He's a guard, 6'6". I think that's a big deal to the team. And I say that because Bruce Pearl tweeted out size does matter after this commitment, but led Georgia Tech in scoring last year, 13.9 points per game, 5.5 rebounds per game. Do you see how big do you think this pickup is for Auburn basketball entering the 2024-25 season?
I think it's huge. I think they kind of changed course a little bit, and everybody thought they were going to go get a true backup point guard. I think Auburn tried to do that in Miles and Ivy Curry. But at the end of the day, you cannot not take a kid like Miles Kelly, 6'6", incredible wingspan, can play the 2 or the 3. So what does this do? What does this mean for the Auburn basketball roster? That's the bottom line. Number one, It gives Auburn 10 seniors. Holy crap. If this is you have 10 seniors. It gives you flexibility. People will wonder now, who's the backup point guard? It's Denver Jones. So you'll start Pegues at the 1, Jones at the 2, Chad Baker Mazzara or Kelly at the 3. Don't write him off. A guy that averaged 14 points a game for 2 years in the ACC can play. If he slides to the 2, Denver Jones slides to the 1 to back up Pegues. You got Pettiford coming as the 5-star recruit. He can play the 1 or the 2 as well. So now you've got a lot of versatility. You've got Chaney Johnson at the 4, along with the kid that they got from SMU. But I think that the strategy changed a little bit. Everybody thought you're going to go get that 4 that can probably beat out Chaney Johnson and then go get the backup point guard. Auburn did some things a little bit differently, has a lot of flexibility, has a lot of versatility. And so this kid instantly becomes one of your top scorers. He is one of your best threats to score the basketball right now. He can do it from behind the three-point line, and is 6'6". He's a slasher too. Great get for Auburn to be able to get him and to sell him. What are you selling him if you're Bruce Pearl, Lindsay? Are you selling him on the fact that you might be able to come in and start at the 3, or even if you don't, hey, let's make you a combo guard. You'll get a ton of minutes at the 2 and the 3. We'll split your minutes at both positions. I think that's what you have to do in this day and age. So it's a great get for Auburn. And again, another senior leader scorer that makes Auburn very dangerous.
Yeah, it sounds like this upcoming season is the year for Auburn basketball. So let's see if all of these seniors together can get Auburn back to the postseason success we're looking for. Because the regular season has been great, but you've had issues when you got into the tournament with how far you've gone recently. Let's see if this is the year.
I'll tell you something else that's very key that's not getting mentioned in this is that probably in a couple of weeks, Auburn fans are going to be privy to the schedule release that Auburn's going to play from a non-conference standpoint. Never mind the Bahama games and all that stuff, but the games that they're going to schedule in Birmingham and some other places, I think Auburn fans are going to be very pleased with the level of competition. To play that non-conference schedule, to have 10 seniors on that roster is really a great luxury to have.
It absolutely is. And you feel like if you lose one guy to injury, you've got plenty of experience. You have versatility. A lot of these guys, Kelly's a combo guard. He can flex 2, 3, things like that. You feel good about it. Darrell, where can folks go to find more of you and all of your stuff and give you some love for the awesome job you're doing this week?
DAP6410. You can follow me on Twitter. Monday mornings, I'm on WANI with our good friend Ben Taylor. Tuesday afternoons, On the Line on the Auburn Network. And then some written stuff for Auburn Daily. I think probably by the end of next week, now that the roster's set, I'm going to do a deep dive into the Auburn basketball roster, what it means, and just kind of recapping how the flexibility will play out.
Oh boy, a patented Darrell Dapprich deep dive. I cannot wait. I'm Lindsay Crosby.
Recap. We call it the DAP recap, man.
The DAP recap. I love that. I'm Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. It's more than just baseball, but it's mostly baseball. Let's be honest. Zac is back next week. And until then, this has been Locked On Auburn.